lightness, a certain fun characteristic to the meeting. The process leader needs to know how to support and value the contribution of all group members, and how to assist the problem owner or the solution implementer refine and clarify their action plan. And just a thought in passing, the group leader may well feel that he or she has ideas to contribute themselves to the meeting, so they'll need to know when it's appropriate for them to do that and when it might be more appropriate for them to sit quietly and simply facilitate the process. The second person in this group meeting, as we've suggested, is the problem owner or the solutions implementer, POSI for short. Now, in a school setting, this person's likely to be, say, a class teacher in a primary school or the year coordinator in a high school. It doesn't have to be, but typically those would be the people who would tend to own the problem in terms of an individual student with behaviour problems. There'll be the one person in the group who knows the student in question well. They'll be the one to whom the questions are directed. And more importantly, perhaps, they'll be the person in the group that will be responsible for choosing one or more solutions and implementing it. Very important, this, because somebody needs to leave the meeting with ownership of the solutions and a willingness to implement those solutions. So that's the most important quality for them. And again, as with the process leader, it may be that as the POSI is answering the questions, providing information, that they again have ideas of their own that they may want to write down and feedback to the group at a later point. That leaves us then with the third subgroup in the meeting, the resources, the ideas people. This obviously these people need to be chosen carefully. You can't just take any old people from the school. You need to choose the people with the kind of qualities that we're going to describe over the next couple of slides. But at a general level, these people really want to be a mixture of roles, responsibilities in the school. You don't want all subject teachers, you don't want all pastoral care people, you want a mixture wherever possible. So you might have a class or subject teacher, you might have an education assistant, a member of a senior or a middle management team, you might have from outside of the school psychologist, you could have one or two of these people, but generally the synergy of the process is going to come from these people having different perspectives rather than all having the same perspectives. The synergistic nature of the creative process encourages different perspectives to kind of rub up against each other, and from this friction, that's where the new ideas develop. In some cases, we have run this model with the students' parents, carers, forming a part of the resources team, but you will appreciate that not all parents, carers have the capacity, either emotionally or attitudinally, to participate in this process. But where the school feels that the parent carer has got something to contribute, then obviously that's going to add a different dimension to the creative problem solving process. In even rarer cases, the student might be involved, him or herself. But one would have to say, as a general rule, it's likely for most students whose behaviour is challenging that they would find it difficult in a number of ways to take part in the process. It's important to say that the resources don't have to know or have first-hand experience of the student. In fact, it might even be a disadvantage to the creative process if they do know the student, because then they're more likely to say things like, well, I know this kid and that won't work. In other words, they're more likely, if they know the student, to operate in what you might call the logical domain of thinking rather than the creative one. So that's another slight difference between this model and some other problem-solving models. And a word of caution, Educationalists are traditionally logical thinkers. This is why they come into the profession. They see education as a logical process. So this approach doesn't suit everybody in a school. So this is why it's important to try and choose from the school people who have some, most, all of these following characteristics. So this is what research has shown us. This is what William Gordon from Synectics suggested were the characteristics of creative problem solvers. This was the first thing he said. He said, creative problem solvers circle around a problem rather than rushing to a solution. They're amused rather than self-protective when their ideas are regarded as wrong. When confronted with a block or a problem, they can redouble their efforts to find a solution. They enjoy the feeling of being on track of an idea, and they tolerate and perhaps use apparently irrelevant ideas from another group member. You might say they suspend adult disbelief. They make suggestions which state the partial solution, the obvious solution, a tentative solution, and even perhaps they see benefit in suggesting something that might be, on the face of it, outright wrong. They take a positive view of problems, regarding them with curiosity and interest, and they have an enthusiasm to solve them. They're supportive of others as they attempt to generate ideas. They hold the view that there's something positive, something to work on with every pupil, and they hold the view that no problem is unsolvable. They might even look to other ideas. They might look to education. They might look to other areas other than education for ideas. And then finally, they'll have the ability to combine problem analysis, ideas generation, detailed planning, all in one meeting. I don't know whether you can save that or not. I hope you can. Okay, let's look at some of the specific techniques that this process uses. Some of these will be new to many people in education. They're a vital part of the creative problem-solving process. And the first one we have here is what is called in-out listening. And in simple terms, this means that the resources and the process leader and problem owner as well, if they choose, has in front of them a piece of paper divided vertically in the middle with the word in at the top of one column and out at the top of the other. And the idea is that any bits of what you might call factual or relevant information about the problem goes in the in column, and any ideas, any thoughts, any small gems of an idea go into the out column, no matter how strange or weird or wacky these ideas are. And Synectics explains this technique by saying that in typical meetings what happens is people are there to help the problem owner, they're there to have ideas, they'll listen to the problem owner, they'll have one idea, and then they'll think of nothing else other than that idea for the rest of the meeting until they've had a chance to express that idea. And in the meantime, what's happening is lots of other potential ideas are going past, going unnoticed. So, particularly at the beginning of the life of a group such as this, of a team such as this, people will need to be encouraged to write in the out column. They'll be much more inclined to put information in the in column than to put things in the out column. So that's the first different technique that we've got here. Another unusual part of the process, again from Synectics, is what they've called the NAF rating. And this comes in at the ideas discussion stage, and the problem owner is asked to apply the NAF rating against these three constructs. And the thinking again here from Synectics is that if an idea scores highly in terms of novelty, appeal and feasibility, then it's more likely to go away and be implemented. If the idea chosen later in the process by the problem owner, solutions implementer, scores less than a 7 on any of the above ideas, then the group needs to go back and work on that. So an idea might come across as very appealing, very feasible, but it's something that's been tried before. So the group needs to put a different spin on it in terms of the novelty rating. Another strategy taken from Synectics is what they've called excursions. And excursions is the notion of, if you like, putting some distance between yourself and the problem. Getting further away from it, taking an excursion, going away from it so you've got a different perspective, so that you'll have different ideas generated by that different perspective. And this is probably best used when the process leader feels that there are not enough ideas generated through the questions that come before that. You'll get some idea of what those excursions questions look like later in this presentation when I get to that stage of describing the questions. Another technique used not just in Synectics but in other problem solving processes, what you call drawing the problem, drawing the solutions. Some people are better able to make sense of their experiences by drawing them, by representing them in visual, out in front of them manner. Drawing the problem and developing the drawing into possible solutions can be used as an excursion when the group's verbal approach may be flagging. The picture may crystallise the problem, usually in an abstract form rather than in an actual representational drawing, but perhaps on one side of a flip chart paper. Some members of the group may find they're inspired to more creativity in this fashion. So group members are invited to draw on the flip chart either additions to the definition of the problem or begin the process of positively modifying the situation as depicted. And the process leader might typically say to the person drawing, contributing to the image, to ask them what they're drawing about, how this might be relevant to the problem situation. So this verbalization of the problem and the possible solutions may in turn stimulate additional ideas from the more verbally orientated members of the group. Let's look now then at the actual structure of the meeting. This is the heart of the presentation here. So, structure of the meeting has 4 phases. And while the timing that's offered is simply offered as guidance, you really want to be thinking in terms of the meeting lasting no more than an hour and a half. It isn't possible for people's creative energy to flow really any longer than that. Any longer than an hour and a half and it's going to be the law of diminishing returns. But assuming that we keep to somewhere around that kind of timing, there's going to be those 4 phases, which are going to be first of all the problem presentation, and that's going to last somewhere around about 10 minutes. I would recommend no more than that because it's important to bear in mind that you might see the person with the problem as being in a hole, and the resources, you might say, are stood around the edge of the hole, and their job is not to get in the hole with the person with the problem but to help that person out. The more problem information you get, the more the inclination is to get in the hole with the person with the problem. The more problem information you get, the more you're likely to regard the problem as unsolvable. So in this model, we keep the problem talk fairly brief. Then the next phase of the meeting, the ideas generation phase, lasts around 40 minutes. And the intention here at this point is to generate as many ideas as possible. Perhaps 30 or 40 from the group as a whole. The thinking here is to generate as many ideas as possible.